Welcome everybody out to podcast number 422. Are you acting professionally? Stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome everybody. I hope you're doing well. And I hope you had a wonderful Halloween. I know I had a really, really great Halloween. I'll talk about that on the next podcast. Anyway, last time we talked about cleanliness, and I really enjoy that podcast because I hope you're taking each and every one of those topics and implementing them in your life. You know, the other thing that I do with people is I'll get on a Miro board and share the link, and when people have questions and they want to map out their career and their next steps, I go onto the Miro board and I make sure to map those out step by step, and then people do the assignments at their own at their own pace, is what I wanted to say. And they make progress, and it's a really neat little system. I love doing that. If you want to do that with me on a coaching standpoint, when phone calls might not be practical or full coaching program might not be practical, let's get you signed up. Because when we think about a concept, if I in a podcast say, hey, consider reading this book or doing this or improving your handwriting, knowledge of how to do that isn't power. Action is power. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge in action is power. So I block letter write. I do those things. I get up. I exercise. I do that. Meaning everything that I talk about, I do. Well, with the exception of maybe a few things where I fall off and on, but I get back to them. You know what I mean? So like action, doing these things are the things that will bring you the most profitability, the most success in life, the most happiness and joy. So last time we talked about cleanliness. I hope you've taken steps to actually implement that and take your next step on your path. This time we're going to talk about professional conduct. So this one's a little bit abstract. You're either going to learn from this. You're either going to learn this from wisdom or sad experience. And the sad experience with this topic can be really, really bad. So I'm giving a shout out to everyone who's listening to the podcast, whether you're an executive, an owner, a leader, a project manager, a superintendent, but especially this podcast applies to the young kids or the industry hires that are coming into management positions, workers, foremen, the rest of y'all that haven't been forced to go through that professional development to act professionally, morally, ethically in those things. So please pay attention to me today. We're going to talk about professional conduct. I often joke with people, I grew up in California, and although California can be considered, a somewhat progressive state when it comes to taking care of people, it's also a very irreverent, kind of joking, crazy kind of an environment. So when people get around me and they're joking, or about different things, unless it's inappropriate and I have to say something, if they're joking around me, I'm like, oh, it doesn't bother me. I grew up in California, because we're just the group that I hung around with in high school and friends, whether I chose to or not. We're kind of a rowdy bunch. And so I had to learn these concepts the hard way, really, because I didn't go to school. I had great parents, but they didn't teach me these things because they were kind of a rowdy bunch too. So if you're listening to this podcast and you have any of those tendencies, this is your podcast, because we're going to talk about those concepts today. Here's a reminder. I love reminding us about this. It takes all the non-cognitive skills to be great. All the non-cognitive skills: grit, determination, discipline, hunger, and growth. Greatness and happiness go to those that are willing to do the hard work and actually implement. So don't wait. The time will never be right. Let's get this going. And let's remember these things. The 7 major positive emotions are desire, faith, love, intimacy, enthusiasm, romance, hope. The 7 major negative emotions are fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, superstition, anger. These things are going to lead you into a bad road. So I want to anchor us always back to the concept of gratitude and giving. I love after going jogging. Sometimes I even do it during the middle of the day, go jogging, and then there's a place at the park where I'll do my box breathing and do my gratefuls and think about what I'm going to do that day to give. And I highly recommend that to you, to neurologically program your mind towards being grateful and giving. So let me ask you a question. What are you grateful for today? I'll give you 3 seconds. if any of you are listening to this at 1.5, 2 times the speed, I feel bad because that's not enough time. But let me do this. What are you going to do today to give to others and to really magnify your calling, really magnify your position to be able to bless and to give and to share? 3 seconds. Well, I hope that that's been helpful for you. Those are the things that we really need to act on today as we head out and live a remarkable life. So let me give you a story heading into this topic. Remember, this topic is about professional conduct. So there was well, this is kind of an abstract story, but I'll tell you anyway. So I've been able to do hundreds and hundreds, heck, maybe no, it's probably not thousands. It's probably hundreds. It's definitely hundreds and hundreds of interviewing people for positions over the years. And I've always enjoyed just getting a diverse group of people in and interviewing them. There were and a couple of times I've had this experience where it literally sounds like they're talking to me like I was their parole officer, where it's fake, it's not real, and they're not where they're not really being authentic about who they are. And they sound like victims and they're blaming things on other people. And immediately I get a feel for it and I'm like, something's not right. Right. So if you go into an interview and it's something like this, okay, I'm looking for a new position and I really I want to come to work for your company. I'm really good at what you do, what I do. I know everything there is to know about that. And then you start to dig in and ask questions like, how did you work with your previous team? Well, okay, so this guy on this team, he hated me, and his boss, they were like cousins, and so he always got after me, and didn't like me very much from the beginning, so they wouldn't say very many good things. Okay, what was your last performance rating? Well, so see, my boss didn't like me, and there was this time where I was supposed to lock up the gang box, and I did, but somebody else unlocked it, and then they accused me, and some tools got stolen, and so answer after answer after answer, it's like, what is going on here? This person doesn't sound like they're telling the truth. And there was this one guy, I remember I was meeting with him downtown Phoenix. Where was it? It was on Thomas and Central. And we were having lunch and he just kept giving me these answers over and over: victim, 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 dishonest, dishonest, dishonest. And I told him, I was like, it sounds like you're talking to your parole officer. Like, you are not giving me straight answers. And he was like, I appreciate the feedback. I disagree. And we ended up not hiring him. But then turns out after the fact, he got into some more trouble with his employers because he didn't have a moral and an ethical background. And you can tell in his speech. So that's just well, it's not funny for him. I actually hope he's doing well. But it's kind of a funny little thing. Anybody that does interviews, eventually you'll find a person where it sounds like they're talking to their parole officer and they're really trying to like pull one over you, and fake you out and be dishonest and not tell you the truth about what's going on. But really, the concept here is we don't have to do that, and we don't have to sell somebody, and we don't have to talk to somebody like we're talking to our parole officer. We don't have to convince them. We don't have to be deceitful. If we just start acting with honesty and integrity, and we get this professional conduct down, and then we will have the references and the background and the people that will support us all around us because we have that background, and we'll be able to get any job, recommendation, promotion that we need and that we deserve and that we've worked hard for and that we're trained for, right? So let's go ahead and head into this. I hope that story was impactful. I thought it was kind of funny because really the point of the story for me is there's nothing that can substitute for character, right? And I remember one of my favorite movies is The Cowboys. It's a John Wayne movie. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. The Cowboys, it's really great. It's where John Wayne takes a bunch of kids and has them help him on a trail ride, on a cattle drive, because all of the adults are out. I can't remember. I think they went out west for the gold rush, and they were like, "Hey, we can't help you this year." And so John Wayne tells them to go to hell, basically, and goes into the local school and says, "You got to be above this tall to come on the cattle drive, and I'm hiring you, and I'll pay you a silver dollar," something like that, when you're done. Anyway, so as they're going along, these three guys come and they offer to John Wayne, and they say whatever his character was. I can't remember. That's embarrassing because that's one of my favorite movies. But anyway, John Wayne's character, he talks to him, and they say, "Hey, I've been on that drive and that drive and that drive." And after John Wayne said, "Hey, what's your experience here?" give me some drives that you've been on. And they mentioned him, and I think they mentioned this guy named Fance. And John Wayne was like, if you would have been on the drive with him, you'd be in a pine box. He died about 6 months ago. And then the guy says, and I think it was Bruce Dern. Anyway, he says, well, I've been caught now, haven't I? And at the end, he explains it, and he's like, we just got out of jail. Bruce Dern does, and he's like, we just got out of jail. I got all those names from the Cattleman's brand book, so whatever, the booklet that shows all the brands for the cattle drives around the area, or the herds rather. And John Wayne's like, yeah, well, I can't hire you. Anyway, the adults were saying, basically, hire us, we'll help you instead of these little kids hauling across the plain. And John Wayne was like, well, I can't use you. And then Bruce Dern says, you're going to hold prison against us? And he says, no, I don't hold prison against you, but I can't stand a liar. And I've always remembered that quote. So if you want to check out that scene, I highly recommend it. Just say, I can't stand a liar, the Cowboys, John Wayne. It should come up on YouTube. But it's a really neat little quote, and it anchors me back to this topic today. So I want to go through a couple of concepts. So let me just tell you from my background, when I'm teaching entry-level people or workers or foremen, one of the biggest things is getting these foundational principles that really all of our parents should have taught us when we were young, but some of us, and I'll put that myself in that boat, didn't learn. And so let's learn them now. And if you're in a professional position, you're like, this really doesn't apply to me. Great. But I would still recommend going through and doing an audit and seeing how you're doing, right? So I'll go through some of these, and I distilled these down from some outlines from some research that I've done and some experiences that I've had. So I hope they're a help. So let's go ahead and do this. Oh wait, let me make sure that I'm doing. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm good on my outline. All right. So first of all, confidentiality, right? So I heard this quote one time that was really neat. Like, if you're having a conversation about somebody to somebody that can help, meaning, like, if I'm a director on a project and I'm talking about one of my direct reports and I'm talking to the CEO of the company or HR about something that we can do to help them, that's not gossip. That's something that we should do to coach and manage and mentor, right? But if you're talking about somebody to somebody who can't help with their career development or with a situation or provide, and basically they don't have any direct influence over the situation, then it's just gossip. The other thing with confidentiality is, and I see this a lot going from company to company, is intellectual property, stealing things from one company to go to another company. It's unethical, immoral. So I really do everything I can to audit myself with that and to encourage others to keep things confidential, right? There are also some things that from a legal perspective or from a human resources perspective, we just have to keep those things confidential. So I would say one of the really big things from a professional conduct standpoint that I would start out with is confidentiality. Know when to speak up about something and know when not to. I heard a quote one time that said, you can tell a lot about a person not by what they say about themselves, but by what they say about others. And I've always liked that. Another one, and you've heard this throughout the podcast, is drive and urgency. Everybody that comes to a company should work hard and put in an honest day's work. I remember a story from a very respected leader one time where he had taken some office supplies from his employer and brought them home without permission. And his father or some mentor in his life was like, I'm disappointed in that kind of behavior. You should never go to work and steal from your employer or just assume that those things are yours or steal their time, right? If you are working for somebody, if you're working at a company, then you put a good, honest, hard day's work. You make sure that you're working the expected hours, and you make sure that you're not stealing any resources from that company and that you are delivering more than what you're receiving, or at least on par with. But most of the time, the concept is add value, create raving fans. And so that's really what we need to be doing. The other one is communication. So professional communication. Now, in construction, it's a little bit difficult because they have these things called taboo words, and Tony Robbins talks about them. So he'll use the F word and the S word and the GD word and some of those words in professional settings on purpose to get people to remember them. The other thing is Patton used to use this. I think he probably used it too much, but there are situations in construction where people use cussing at times, but I would say that the best thing to do is to focus on doing it at the right times, right? You should never cuss at somebody. Never use cussing in professional environments. Never use cussing around people where they feel like it's uncomfortable. Never do that when you're in interviews, when you're talking to customers. Now, I don't know of any intentional way or reason to use cussing. I can tell you that sometimes during morning huddles or when I was giving a speech or doing something like that, and I was demonizing a bad behavior, not a human, I wasn't talking to anybody directly, that I would use those taboo words to make it stick. And I found it very effective and that people would listen. But I think there's even more power in people that can learn to effectively communicate without it. So I would just say be careful, do it at the right times. Never any political talk or harassing talk, no inappropriate jokes. We don't talk about women. We don't in a negative, objectifying light. We don't whistle. We don't catcall. We don't do those things. We don't demean anybody on our project sites. Now, this might seem basic, but for those of you who are directors or owners or superintendents or PMs, are you tolerating behavior like this? Are you letting it happen when you should put a stop to it? There are companies that still put up with this stuff, especially from the people that have been around a while that are invaluable. I remember a superintendent being in a room once, and I reported it, and I immediately, but they were surprised that I reported it. There was a superintendent that literally turned over to the project engineer, who was a female, slapped her on the leg, and was like, hey, it's something about being attractive and comparing her to somebody else. And so I was like, that's appropriate. That behavior is not appropriate. I said that to them. And then I also reported it to his superiors. And somebody might think that's a little tattletale-ish or prudish, but we're not in high school anymore. There is no such thing as that. So I really want to bring to light that if something like that happens, we need to fix it. I told you before the story that I was suspended for not reporting a situation like that. And I've been very careful ever since to make sure that I'm reporting the right things. And so I would just encourage you to be as careful with that as you possibly can. We never, ever talk about politics, harassing jokes. We never harass people, say inappropriate things, talk about those sexually illicit topics, right? The other thing is we do not enter situations where there's a conflict of interest. So if a trade partner wanted to come onto the project and I had a selection of 2 or 3 trade partners, right, as a construction manager, and that trade partner had taken me out hunting, for instance, before the trades were selected, and then they get the contract, obviously that's a conflict of interest. I can't accept gifts and things like that because that's a conflict of interest. That can happen with vendors, that can happen with subcontractors, that can happen in a number of different contracting situations and in a number of different environments in construction. We can never have a conflict of interest and do one thing that benefits you somewhere else when it really should have been a horizontal playing field equal play, fair play. The other thing I would say is there's never any harassment and never any discrimination. Now, I talk about protected classes a lot, and I'm going to mention it again. So we never change how we would deal with somebody based on their race, color, religion, creed, national origin, ancestry, sex, including gender, pregnancy, sexual orientation, and gender identity, age, physical or mental disability, or veteran status. And there are others that you need to be particularly aware of, especially if you're focusing not just on a federal level, but a state level. But you cannot discriminate against other people. And that means, and I'm really thankful for this training, that means 2 parts. That means you can't not hire them, you can't fire them, you can't punish them specifically for those things. And you are not supposed to be treating them differently. So if you would come up to a male and say, okay, I need you to do this better. This isn't fast enough. This isn't good enough, right? And then you go have another employee doing the same behavior and you need to correct them, but it's a female. And so you opt not to because you quote unquote don't want to get in trouble. Well, you are actually discriminating against them based on their gender, and you can't do that. You need to treat everybody equally and fairly. And so you cannot harass people based on those classes, and you cannot discriminate against people based on those classes, and you cannot treat them differently based on those classes. So, and it doesn't matter how you feel. And this is probably one of the biggest concepts that to get our minds wrapped around. if somebody was like, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way," it doesn't matter how we meant it. It's how did the person take it? Whether it was a joke or whether it was a comment or whether it was a word or whatever. If somebody else doesn't feel comfortable, then that is the measure of the harassment and the discrimination in large part. So we have to be very careful and not just think, how did I mean it, but how did it come across? How did somebody receive it? Am I making people feel comfortable? So let's go on to two other ones. This is already 20 minutes here. I want to talk about ethical behavior. So when we talk about ethics, there's a number of topics, but generally, right, when we say, what is ethical behavior? Ethical behavior is honest behavior. It's loyal behavior. It's behavior where you have integrity according to the standards that you signed up with. That's an important concept. Even if somebody doesn't have personal integrity, if somebody comes onto the project site, or if you do, or if you are hiring onto a company and you agree to follow their rules, that now becomes your integrity, and you have to have integrity and follow the standards of ethics and moral behavior according to what you signed up for. So some of the people, they come on the job and they'd be like, okay, I don't agree with putting my fall protection on or wearing my safety glasses. And I was like, fine, no big deal. You don't have to agree with me. But when you came to this project site, you signed on that orientation that you would follow the rules. Did you not? Yes, I did. Are you a person of your word? Yes, I am. Okay. Usually that will resonate with people, but ethical behavior is honest behavior. It's loyal behavior. It's behavior where you have integrity according to what you've signed up for. It's respectful behavior. It's giving behavior. It's responsible behavior. So we have to have an ethical background. Let's talk about a moral background. Now, this is more for the professional development. This doesn't enter so much into the professional world, but I will say, the more you have a basis for this, the better off you're going to be in life, right? So I can't tell you how many times these things have affected somebody's performance at work. Let me go through the list. Sexual immorality, pornography, hate speech, censorship, drugs and alcohol addiction, sexism, racism, discrimination against immigrants, basically criticism of people who die by suicide, those who who participate in the unethical treatment of animals, or other people or family members. I literally can list off, and I'm not going to because I'm on a podcast, but I could list off 10. That doesn't sound like a lot, but 10 people, probably by name, right now that have been terminated because sexual immorality has come into the project site, pornography, hate speech on Facebook or LinkedIn or somewhere, somebody censoring somebody else, drugs and alcohol addiction has affected their work performance. I can just keep going on down the list. And so when people are like, well, we're going to separate, work and morals and stuff. No. I'm talking to you from a professional development standpoint. You have to be focused on your moral behavior in addition to the professional work ethics that you're focused on, right? And so it affects everything that you do. And so I would say, make sure to check yourself when it comes to those things. Some closing bit of advice: always tell the truth. Never destroy property. Have courage to stand up for the right things when the time comes. Always keep your promises and do what you say you're going to do. Don't cheat. Treat others as you want to be treated. Don't judge other people, and be dependable. So I'll ask you some questions. How is your verbal conduct? How do you behave at work? Are you honest, and do you have integrity? Are you above reproach? And the last question, is there anything that you could do to step up your game, whether you're a manager, a leader, an owner, a foreman, a worker, anybody listening to this podcast? What could you do better tomorrow to improve your behavior so that you don't learn from sad experience instead of wisdom? Because here's the challenge. I'd like you to do an evaluation and see where you are on this. Everybody listening can do something to reinforce this. If you're a leader or an owner of a company, why not reinforce these concepts with your organization? If you're a director, why not make clear with your project teams that this is the standard of behavior? If you're a superintendent, why not make sure that all of the foremen understand this? If you're a foreman, you need to make sure that you're aligning with this so you can get your next promotion and teach the workers. If you're a worker and you're heading towards being a lead person or a foreman, you have to get this reined in and under control. Every single person listening to this podcast can do something with this so that we can all achieve professional conduct and take our professional development to the next level. Sorry about that. I stumbled a little bit. But I hope this podcast helps. I hope you're able to do an evaluation. I hope you're able to just do a quick check and be like, oh, wow, I could really do better with that. And I'm going to stand up for what is right. And I'm going to stand for something. And tomorrow is a new day. It's a better day. And it's a day where I am going to act more professionally and reap the benefits and blessings that come from that, because not only is it giving, but it's also self-preserving. On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.